Air Force One has touched down in Chicago, where the US president prepares to hand the baton on to Democratic nominee Kamala Harris in front of some 50,000 Democrat officials and supporters. Day one of the Democratic National Convention is being framed as a celebration of Joe Biden's legacy with the theme For the People.
Kamala Harris will officially accept the party's presidential nomination as she works to bridge the gap in the polls with Donald Trump as Election Day draws near. Let's go straight to North America correspondent Carrington Clark, who's at the DNC in Chicago. Carrington, good morning. So tell us, what's the main event today?
Well, good morning. Well, today the main event is the man who up until about 4 weeks ago would have been closing this particular convention and would have been being endorsed to run yet again against Donald Trump at the upcoming presidential election. Instead, Joe Biden, the President of the United States, is very much a support act for his VP, Kamala Harris, who has already been officially endorsed as the Democratic candidate for president, but is now going through the ceremony of receiving the endorsement from the party faithful here in Chicago. Joe Biden will close the first day of this four-day convention, and yes, this will be a celebration of his administration. We will hear people. He will be introduced by his wife, Jill Biden, will be speaking before him, and then Ashley Biden will be introducing her grandfather. And what we will be hearing from Joe Biden will be a defense of his record, but also what the party want to hear is a full-throated endorsement of his VP, Kamala Harris. And although she has been the VP for 3.5 years, to many in America, she's still a relatively unknown quantity. She received the nomination of her party through very unusual means, effectively inheriting the support of Joe Biden. The delegates that will be seated in Serena over the coming hours are people who were selected because they backed him so strongly. Instead, they're throwing their support behind Kamala Harris, who does come to this particular convention with a huge amount of momentum. Every poll that's been coming out recently suggests that this race is either tightened or she's now ahead. And that is a very different picture to what it was just before Joe Biden stepped down. So an important day to start, and that handing of the torch over to Kamala Harris, how gracefully that is done by the party, you think would be very important in whether or not the American public are willing to accept this change at the top of the ticket.
Carrington, we've heard there have been some protests in Chicago as well. What's happened there so far?
So this was potentially going to be a very tricky situation for the Democratic Party, particularly among the progressive wing of the party. There is great unhappiness with how the administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has handled the war in Gaza and the administration's enduring support for Israel, their continued shipments to Israel of arms as this war has been waged and has killed tens of thousands of people in the Palestinian territories in Gaza. But the protest appears to be much smaller than what organisers were suggesting. There were some estimates of tens of thousands taking to the streets around this particular arena. Instead, the estimates seem to be maybe a couple of thousand of people have actually turned up. There are photos currently being distributed showing that protesting placards have been left on the ground because there just wasn't enough people to take them up. So it's an unfortunate situation for those pro-Palestinian protesters, but potentially good news for the Democratic Party because it appears that it's not going to be a major distraction for them on this first day. There are other protests planned, particularly on the last day of this convention when Kamala Harris will speak, but at this point it does appear that that protest is much smaller than was anticipated.